Oh, hi. What's up, Maker Faire? It's 2024, and in case you haven't noticed, pen plotters are back in. It's really popular. Now, I'm not talking about printing like inkjet or laserjet printing. I'm talking about machine-controlled pens. It's basically a machine that draws. And there are these artists out there using pen plotters because they're outputting these beautiful vector-based artworks that they design or they create an algorithm to make. And the machine is a physical drawing output device. It draws. And there's something special about the fact that it's drawn. I think that there's a kind of romance to it, that it's not printed, but actually the machine itself is drawing. And if you think about the earliest pen plotters, 1959, CalComp made this, the 565, one of the first pen plotters. Their ad campaign was all about that romance, right? It's not an output device, but it's saying, hey, we can teach your computer to draw. And I think that this idea is a really fascinating kind of old one, that we want to get the thing out of the computer, but the way the computer does it is it draws. What I find intriguing, though, is that there are some artists nowadays who are using pen plotters in a much different way. This is Liz Melkor, and what she's doing here is, yes, she's plotting, but there's an interaction with that slow process. The plotter is dipping a brush into water, and then she is going in with a palette knife and ink, and basically working with the machine as a team to make something unique. And I love this because it harkens back to the kind of history of electronic art. In 1959, Akira Kaneyama made this robot-controlled car, which is wire-controlled by him, and it has a little paint can dripping paint, and he's kind of roving it around and making this painting. And what I love about this is that it's not about plotting, it's about art and technology relationships, right? He and the machine are collaborating on something special. And it doesn't only relate to electronics. How many of you have used an Etch-a-Sketch or a Spirograph before? Absolutely. Well, congratulations, you have interacted with a drawing machine. Now, we've been using machines long before the electronic age, and to really kind of understand the answer to what is a drawing machine, it helps to go back in time and see all the different ways that we've interacted with machines to draw. So let's go back 600 years. So in the early Renaissance, there was this fascination with trying to get drawings to look more realistically. And so you had Filippo Brunelleschi, an architect in Florence, who comes up with a mathematical way to describe perspective, right? So there's the horizon line, there's the vanishing point, and there's a geometry to how things recede in space, so it looks like real life. But it's complicated. It's math. So his good friend Alberti publishes all the math to it, and at the end he says, well, you know, there's a shortcut to this. And he calls it the veil. And this is Da Vinci's version of the veil. So what you have is, in the middle, there's this frame with a scrim, a very, very gauzy piece of fabric, and then a hole in a board, and when you look through, you can see the object beyond, kind of caught in that scrim, and then you can trace and paint it. Here's a version by Albrecht Dürer. So it's a nice machine that makes for an easy portrait. You light it well, you make a quick drawing. Now, these are all really simple devices, and so you see what's called the sighting grid, and you've probably done this thing where you transfer an image to another image using a grid. So you have a viewpoint, you have this wires on a frame, and you look through, and you have a piece of paper with corresponding grid, and you just draw little sections at a time. And it was a way to shortcut the complicated math from perspective. But, as with any technology, they become much more sophisticated over time. This is Ludovico Cigoli, good friend of Galileo, with a drawing machine that's a little hard to explain. But what you have here is that the artist is looking through the little eyepiece at a bead at S, right? The little red bead is on a string, and you line it up with a corner of your subject at A, and in your right hand you have a little stylus. It looks like a mouse with a little pointer, right? And as you move the pointer down, it moves the bead to follow along the edge of the device. So now you're drawing a vertical line, and there's a weight on it, so when you release it back up, it draws in the opposite direction. Now, to do horizontal lines, in your left hand, you have a pulley wheel. So you turn it counterclockwise, and the entire carriage moves to the left. You turn it to the right, it goes to the right. And so you can draw horizontal lines. And if you've done an Etch-a-Sketch before, you have one vertical, one horizontal. If you coordinate them both, you can start doing complicated drawings. This is an insanely difficult machine to operate. I've used replicas of it. But it is a way to show the sophistication in which they're trying to figure out this perspective problem. So I'm going to go through a few different use cases to kind of talk about the different ways that machines work. It's really easy nowadays to copy-paste, but the history of copying, is printmaking or photography, letterpress. But to do that, you have to set up a lot of equipment, you have to make an engraving, you have to mix photochemistry, and so there's always an interest in making instant drawn copies. Some of you might be familiar with a pantograph. It's over 400 years old, and the way it works is you have a pivot point, you have these mechanical linkages, and you trace an existing drawing, and then the pencil on the other end draws the thing that you're tracing. And if you change the ratio of the linkages, you get different ratio enlargements. You can also switch them so that the pencil is on the inside and then the thing you're tracing on the outside, so you can make reductions. Really simple, really elegant. You could build one in an hour. Over time, the sophistication of these things became outstanding. These are finely machined parts. Some of them have counterweights and wheels to allow the action to be much more smooth. But maybe some of you had some of these toys. Again, it's a really, really simple machine to use. Now, that same technology was applied to lots of different types of use cases. So here, Isaac Hawkins made the polygraph. Now, this is not a lie detector test. This is a multiple drawing machine. And what you have are two quills on this carriage, and when you write with one, you make a copy automatically with the other. You send one off to the person you're writing it to, you get to keep a copy. Now, Hawkins's favorite and biggest client for this was Thomas Jefferson. And so if you go to Monticello, you can see the polygraph sitting in Jefferson's study. And again, as you can see how it moves, there's like springs and counterweights. It's a really delicate machine, but it makes really incredible copies. Now, what if you want a copy to show up somewhere distant from you? Well, enter Elisha Gray with a telautograph from 1887. Now, you have to follow me on this one. On the right, this box here, this is a transmitter. And it has a pen with two cords attached to potentiometers, X and Y. As you move and write and draw, potentiometers are sending an electric signal across the telegraph wire to the receiver, which has servos that correspond to the potentiometers and actually makes a copy of what you drew. 1887. And here it is working. These were very popular in the 1920s and 30s in libraries, hospitals, and train stations where you had massive infrastructure and you needed to get information across very, very quickly. All right, so this is in a train station in Philadelphia. This is in a library use, and you kind of see it close up here. You write down the call number, and it goes to the person in the stacks, and they bring up the book. It's still one of my favorite, most unbelievable machines. Anyway, I haven't found one working yet, but we'll get there. So if you're an architect or an engineer, one of the parts of your job is to make precise technical drawings. And if you were, let's say, to do something like this, an isometric drawing, the circles, the holes, are not circular, but they're ellipses when you draw them. And so you need to be able to draw very precise ellipses. And that's a lot more complicated than using a compass to draw a circle. And so you have devices based on ancient technologies. Archimedes made a trammel. This is a trammel. And essentially, you can attach an arm, and as it spins around, it makes an ellipse. And if you change the ratio of where the pen is according to the center of the trammel, you get different radii and different focal lengths, the foci for the ellipse. Once again, they got very sophisticated. This is 1819, and there are these finely made brass tools with an arm, and you can make all variety of ellipses. Some of them had bike chains, these kind of ridiculously overbuilt things, but they're really beautiful machines. And there's tons of other machines that one could use to draft things in a much more expedient way. An antigraph. So let's say you're a naval architect and you need to draw a ship's hull, or you're an architect making ionic columns or symmetrical works. You draw one half, and the other half is drawn automatically along a center line. You get a drawing done in half the time. Or if you're measuring or trying to get a drawing of something existing, the seismograph will basically be a molding profiler, and you basically can draw it around, and you get an accurate drawing of this existing architecture. Spirograph was not the first. Geometric pens have been around since the 1700s, and so here you just change the gears and you can make this complex geometry. And these things got even more and more complicated beyond architecture and engineering into mathematics. And so this machine, 1752, it was made to draw the conchoid of Nicomedes. Don't know what it does. The math is a little bit beyond me, but it is a highly precise machine to draw a very complex set of geometry. And calculus is beyond me as well, but the intergraph was a machine where if you trace the curve of a function, it automatically draws the integral curve of that function. These are outstandingly precise machines for drafting and giving information. Now, in the early 1800s, the scientific revolution started to break down into subcategories, right? You had specialties. So people were now making a kind of entire studies of sub-branches of science. And to do that, they needed to collect data and produce graphical data. So these are early data visualization systems. And a familiar one might be the barograph. You probably see these on a mantle somewhere in a nice old Victorian home. And so a barograph measures barometric pressure. So on the right, you have these aneroid cells, the 4 little pancakes, and when the pressure reduces, they expand, and when the pressure increases, they contract, and they're connected to a little robot arm there, right? So that arm has a little pen on it, and it moves up and down. You wind up your drum, and it takes 1 week to go a full revolution, and you've basically charted every bit of barometric pressure change over an entire week. This form factor is probably familiar to you if you think about a seismograph, right? The little pen, the drum is rolling, the pen is going. When it receives impulses about tremors, it starts to move at the corresponding amplitude, and it gives you a graphical record. And the beautiful thing here is that almost all of the inventors and scientists call their thing an ograph. So if you know what the prefix means, you know what the machine draws. And I guarantee you, each of you has seen one of these if you've ever been in a fine art museum, because every one of them has this machine hiding in plain sight. This is a thermohygrograph, and it measures simultaneously temperature and humidity, because the one thing you don't want for your artwork is fluctuations in temperature or humidity. So if working well, you would go up to this machine and you'll see the temperatures at a nice 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and the humidity is a nice 50%, and the machine is giving you that information on an ongoing basis. The amount of machines, the ographs, are vast, but this is one of my favorites. This is a sphygmograph, and this measures pulse and blood pressure. So what you have is a strap that you put tightly onto the patient's arm, and there's a little divot that pushes into the radial pulse of the wrist, and as it hops up and down with the pulse, the arm is moving up and down. But the carriage to the right, you wind it up and it actually moves as it's drawing. So it gives you this short chart in a very quick period of time, the pulse of your patient. Machines can draw things from the other side. Before the Ouija board, there was the planchette. You would get together with your friends, you would hold the planchette. You've all done Ouija, right? You know what this is like. But this, instead of pointing to letters and words, it would make a mysterious drawings. And of course, it took someone in tune with the other side to decipher what this could mean. Seances and seers and mediums were doing these incredible performances and reading these drawings. These are true machines, but these are not the ghost images I'm talking about. I'm more interested in these. How many of you have been in or seen a camera obscura? Yeah. So camera obscura, you have a pinhole or a small lens in a darkened room, and you get this projection of the outside world inside. And this has been known for thousands of years. It's one of our oldest kind of observations of science and optics. But in the 1600s, people started to say, well, you can use this to draw. And so this version of a camera obscura, you have a person sitting inside of a scrim, a gauzy box, which is inside of a camera obscura. So now the artist is on the inside with a rear projection of the image of the outside world. And what they're able to do then is trace it, basically paint it. What's nice is that because the image is upside down and backwards, now by rear projecting it's forward again, and just turn your painting upside down, you've got a great painting. The form factor of camera obscura can change pretty drastically. You have a lot of different ways to do it. This is a portable one with a periscope, so you've got a mirror and a lens, and you're in this darkened tent, and you can set it up outside, and you could do a beautiful landscape. And there are these camera obscuras around the world. This is the one in Santa Monica, built in 1955. And the periscope, you can crank the periscope, and it moves, so you get this 360-degree view on this beautiful reflective parabolic table inside. Go to Lincoln Park, very west edge. How many of you have been to this camera obscura? Yeah, works in the same exact way. This is one of the oldest camera obscuras in the US, and it does the same thing. It has a periscope that moves, and you get a full view of the Pacific Ocean. I will be going there tomorrow. A lot less known camera is the camera lucida. And the camera lucida was a revolution in this idea that you could trace a ghost image. Because instead of a big dark room, you have a prism on an adjustable stand. And it's a beam splitter. So when you look down into the prism, you're seeing both your hand and the subject. And the beauty here is you can do it in full daylight, right? So you look down. This is not a digital composite. This is actually looking into one. And so you have this ghost image of these flowers that are in front of you. And you can also see your hand, so it makes for very, very quick drawing. Now, I know a lot about this because since 2013, I produced the Neo Lucida, which is a new version of the camera lucida, and it works exactly in the same way. When you're looking down, you're seeing your subject, right? So here is kind of pulling out, and you can see the setup where you have this ghost image that only you can see. You trace, you draw it, and you have the flowers in front of you. So yes, I produce these. There are different models for different uses, and this is the shameless plug where I'm like, hey, you can go get one, but I will undercut myself and say that if you don't want to buy one from me, that's perfectly fine, because in the most recent, or the last issue of Make magazine, I wrote an article on how to make one yourself for less money than it costs to buy one of mine. So what I'm interested in here is to kind of talk a little bit about the human-machine collaboration, right? It's not the pen plotter that is the output, the last step before you have your artwork, but rather that there's a whole history of human and machine collaborations for creativity, for creative acts. It's a collaboration, it's an interaction, it's an art and technology history that is rich and deep, long before computers, long before electronics. And what I'm trying to outline here is also different ways in which we think about the way that the machine interacts with us. If you think about a drawing process is your eye, your hand holding a stylus, holding a pencil, right? And when you draw something, you're doing a circuit. I'm looking at something, I'm drawing it, and I have to coordinate what I'm seeing, what I'm physically doing, the pressure on the pencil, what the pencil is showing me, and then loop back again and make decisions, right? Drawing realistically can be hard, and that circuit is something you have to train. But the machines have often kind of sat in these really particular places where it relates to the human. So in the perspective machines, right, the machine is, you're looking into a machine and the machine is guiding where your hand and the stylus would go. Or in the pantograph, your eye and hand, you're tracing this thing, but the machine is holding the stylus and it's making the drawing out there. Or in the precision drafting tools, you're just operating something and the machine is holding the stylus and drawing. Or the chart recorders, the scientographs are all machine basically taking in input and creating a drawing by holding the stylus. Or in the camera obscura and the camera lucida, what you have are machines that are guiding your hand. They're saying, hey, this is where you want to put your hand in the pencil and making a drawing. Different forms, different roles, different kinds of interactions. I love Sharpies on Roombas. Nothing wrong with those. I think they're fantastic, so much fun, easy to do. Pen plotters also are fantastic technology. I love the fact that they're inexpensive and accessible now. When, a few years ago you had to retrofit an old plotter and figure out how to make it work, but now you can do that yourself. But I want to challenge each of you creative, imaginative makers to think about different art technology relationships when it comes to drawing. Because what you might be able to do is answer with new answers to the question, what is a drawing machine? And in case you're curious about more drawing machines, I have been building this archive called drawingmachines.org. There are over 200 different machines there that you can kind of see. I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. But I would love to see what everybody who can make things by looking at this research or coming up with your own answer, what is a drawing machine? Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Pablo. We got plenty of time for questions. If you have a question, raise your hand. I'll bring the mic over. And
hello. So
Hi.
I was wondering why museums still use those humidity machines when they're newer technology. Is it because it's just tried and true that it just works really well, or
Right, so the question is, why do they still use the thermal hygrographs? Insurance. My suspicion is that they need like a paper track record because they borrow a piece of work or they insure the museum, and so they have to kind of keep a paper record. And probably that they're tried and true. They're actually pretty fascinating because the thermo side is a bimetallic strip, just like in an old thermostat. And as the bimetallic strip contracts or expands, the machine moves up. And then the humidity, the hygrograph, is a human hair that's pinned between a kind of clamp. And the human hair is very reliable to expand and contract with humidity. And it's basically battery, you need 2 AA's to just rotate the drum. So I think it's simple, and you have to have one in every room. but my suspicion is it's an insurance thing. So they probably in the basement, they have binders filled with every day, every week of recordings just to prove that they're keeping up with their insurance. Yeah.
Sorry, can you repeat the question on
Replace the
microphone so
hair?
people can?
The
can you
question is,
repeat
yeah.
Do they ever replace the hair on it?
It's a good question. I don't actually know. I have one. I bought one on eBay, and there is the human hair in it, and I've tested it and it works, but I haven't looked into the guide to like how often, and I'm definitely not one to replace the hair. So I don't know whose hair. Does it matter? I don't know if it's be treated. I don't know, but I love that it's a modern machine, a contemporary machine. You can still buy a brand new one, but it's based on a very, very simple analog technology that was discovered hundreds of years ago. Yeah.
Well, in addition to Roombas, there are other things that move in the world, like animals. I'm wondering if there's examples of drawing machines where artists introduce an element of serendipity or initial inspiration from some recording of animals spritzing ink or paint around or something.
Yeah, I didn't get into it, but there's a whole world of artists experimenting with attaching styluses to things. I forget the artist's name, but sets up a canvas and hangs charcoal from tree limbs, and as the wind moves, it's doing these traces. Or people putting like pens and markers dangling on strings in a package and sending it through the postal service, and as it comes out, you kind of get a track record of jostling and moving. I have a video of, there was that TV show Elementary, which was like Sherlock Holmes in New York, and there's one scene where he's got that pet turtle, and he's got a pen attached to it, and just watching the turtle walk around, and it's his way of thinking about like just clearing his mind. So yeah, I think that it's in a far less machinic way, but a kind of way to look at natural behavior and tracking it. There are animals that do draw, in the sense that you have these fish that will like make patterns in the sand, or animals that build nests or organize materials, and I think those are forms of drawings as well. But yeah, there are artists who explore these kind of chance drawings that are not technology-based, but rather nature-based. Absolutely. I only had 20 minutes. I could do this for hours.
Still got plenty of time for questions for Pablo if you have them. Oh.
Do you want me to ask? What's the question? He's going to tell me.
Why do cats like riding Roombas?
Oh, why do cats like riding Roombas? Do you know that?
Great question.
I don't know. I have 3 cats myself. We don't have a Roomba, though, but I think it's probably a fun ride. And as you say it, I think it'll be fun to put a pen on the cat's tail or something to see like their movement while the Roomba's riding around. I do love a good cat on a Roomba video. Always makes me happy, for sure. Thank you.
Any more questions for Pablo?
How many of you have a pen plotter or have used a pen plotter, like an Axis Draw? What do you make with it? Doodles? But you have to make the doodle first and then output it, right? Oh. Yeah.
Parts.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
It's in parts in a
Well,
box.
if you want
and
to,
I try to put it together and make things, but I don't think I've done it right. So.
Well, I'd be happy to talk to you later, because I've repaired a lot of these machines. There have been a
Yeah.
few museums that have allowed me to go in and actually repair them and make them work again, and
Yeah.
it's a hobby of mine as well. So
Okay.
I'd love to see the machine that you have.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Last comments, questions? Last call? All right, then let's give Pablo another round of applause. Thank you,
Thank
Pablo.
you.